Caroline Foster lies to the police during a hospital lockdown to hide a critically wounded Mafia boss and saves his life through improvised treatment. By morning, she learns his identity. Dmitry Volkov, one of the most feared men in the city. Black SUVs surround her home at dawn, and she is taken to his estate, where he presents proof of her crime and forces a brutal choice. Accept his protection and live under his control, or lose her career, her freedom, and become a target for both law enforcement and his enemies. Under Dmitry's protection, Caroline is neither captive nor free. She is drawn into his violent world as a medical asset and moral counterweight, forming a bond with his young daughter as rival factions close in. When war erupts, Caroline must choose between escaping and exposing the Mafia boss, destroying herself and the child she's come to care for, or remaining complicit to secure peace. She stays, preserving stability at the cost of her innocence, ending in a fragile equilibrium built on an irreversible lie. The hospital alarm screamed through the corridors at 2:47 in the morning, and I knew something was very wrong. I had been a night shift nurse at County General for 6 years. I knew the difference between a fire drill, a code blue, and a real emergency. This was different. The lights in the hallway switched to red. The automatic doors locked with a heavy metallic sound that made my stomach drop. My patient in room 304 looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. She was recovering from surgery, and the noise was making her panic. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "Just a precaution. I'll find out what's happening." I stepped into the hallway and nearly collided with Dr. Hayes. His face was pale and he was breathing hard. "Caroline, get back to your station," he said. "Police are coming. There was a shooting 3 blocks away. They think the suspect might try to hide here." Before I could respond, I heard boots pounding on the tile floors. Dozens of them. The elevator doors opened, and police officers flooded onto our floor. They wore tactical gear and carried weapons I had only seen on television. Their faces were hard and focused. "Clear every room," the lead officer shouted. "Check storage closets, bathrooms, everything. He's armed and extremely dangerous." I pressed myself against the wall as they moved past me. My hands were shaking. This was supposed to be a quiet night. I was supposed to finish my rounds, update patient charts, and go home at 7 in the morning to my small apartment where my cat was waiting. I watched the officers move from room to room. They were thorough and fast. Patients were crying. The other nurses looked as scared as I felt. Dr. Hayes was trying to explain to the officers that they couldn't just barge into patient rooms, but no one was listening to him. I turned to go back to Mrs. Patterson when I noticed something strange. The door to treatment room B was slightly open. That room was supposed to be empty. We hadn't used it in 2 days because the equipment was being replaced. The light inside was off, but I could see a shadow moving. My training told me to call for the police immediately. My training told me that getting involved was dangerous and stupid. But something else, something deeper than training, made me walk toward that door instead. I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark except for the red emergency lights bleeding in from the hallway. In the corner, slumped against the wall beneath the empty medical cart, was a man. He was bleeding badly. His shirt was soaked with it. His breathing was shallow and ragged. His eyes were closed, and his face was pale in a way that told me he was going into shock. I should have screamed. I should have run. I should have called for help. Instead, I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. My hands moved on instinct. I grabbed gloves from the supply cabinet and knelt beside him. Close, I could see the wound better. Gunshot left side just below the ribs. The bleeding was bad but not immediately fatal if I acted fast. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. His eyes opened. They were dark, almost black in the dim light, and they focused on me with an intensity that made me freeze. Even dying, even bleeding out on my hospital floor, there was something about his gaze that demanded respect. He didn't speak. He just watched me. I grabbed gauze and pressed it against the wound. He flinched but didn't cry out. His jaw clenched, and I saw the muscles in his neck stand out, but he stayed silent. "You need surgery," I said quietly. "This is bad. You need a doctor." "No." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "No doctors. No police. You'll die. Better than the alternative." I looked into his eyes and saw something I recognized. I had seen it before in patients who had been abused, in people who were running from something worse than death. It was the look of someone who had calculated the risks and decided that pain was preferable to capture. But I also saw something else. Authority. Even bleeding and hidden, this man carried power around him like a coat. His clothes were expensive despite the blood. His watch was worth more than I made in 6 months. And the way he looked at me, it was not the look of someone begging for mercy. It was the look of someone used to being obeyed. Outside, I heard the officers moving closer. They were checking the rooms on this side of the floor now. In less than 2 minutes, they would reach this hallway. I made a choice. I stood up and grabbed a rolling equipment cart from the corner. I positioned it in front of him, creating a visual barrier. Then I found a stack of sterile sheets and draped them over the cart, making it look like stored supplies waiting to be put away. "Don't move," I whispered. "Don't make a sound." He nodded once. I stepped out of the room just as Officer Bradley reached the door. I knew him slightly. He sometimes brought patients to our emergency room after arrests. "Is this room empty?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. "Equipment replacement. We haven't used it in 2 days." He looked past me into the dark room. I held my breath. "You sure?" "I'm sure. I do rounds every hour. There's nothing in there but broken equipment waiting for maintenance." He studied my face for a long moment. I forced myself to meet his eyes and not look away. After what felt like forever, he nodded and moved to the next room. I waited until he was gone before I let myself breathe again. I couldn't go back into the room. Not with officers still on the floor. Not with Dr. Hayes watching me from the nurse's station. I had to act normal. Had to do my job. But my mind was racing. What had I just done? I had hidden a criminal from the police. I had lied to an officer's face. If they found him now, I would lose my license. I would lose my job. I might go to jail. And yet, I couldn't make myself regret it. I checked on Mrs. Patterson. She had fallen back asleep despite the chaos. I updated her chart and moved to my next patient. I did everything I was supposed to do, all while aware that a dying man was bleeding in an empty room 20 feet away. The search continued for another hour. They checked every corner of the hospital. They questioned the staff. They reviewed security footage from the entrance. Finally, at 4 in the morning, the lead officer announced they were moving their search to other locations. "If anyone sees anything suspicious, call immediately," he told Dr. Hayes. "This man is extremely dangerous. Do not approach him. Do not try to help him." Dr. Hayes nodded seriously. "Of course. We'll be vigilant." The officers left. The automatic doors unlocked. The red lights switched back to normal. The hospital released its held breath, and slowly, everything returned to routine. Except nothing was routine anymore. I waited another 30 minutes. Then I grabbed a medical supply cart and pushed it down the hallway toward treatment room B. If anyone asked, I was restocking. Normal procedure. Nothing suspicious. I slipped inside and locked the door behind me. He was still conscious, which surprised me. He had his hand pressed against the wound, and his breathing was more controlled. When I knelt beside him, his eyes focused on me immediately. "They're gone," I said quietly. "I know. I heard." I pulled back the gauze. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. He needed stitches at minimum, probably surgery, definitely antibiotics. If I did nothing, infection would kill him even if blood loss didn't. "I need to treat this properly," I said. "I need supplies from the pharmacy. It's going to take me 20 minutes. Can you stay quiet that long?" "Yes. If someone comes in, if you hear voices, don't move. Don't speak. I'll handle it." He looked at me with those dark, measuring eyes. Why are you doing this? It was a good question. I didn't have a good answer. Because you'll die if I don't, I said finally. People die every day. Not on my watch. Not if I can stop it. Something shifted in his expression. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. What's your name? Caroline. Caroline Foster. Thank you, Caroline Foster. I stood up. Don't thank me yet. This is going to hurt. I spent the next 3 hours working on him. I cleaned the wound, stitched it closed, administered antibiotics, and set up an 4 for fluids. I worked in silence, and he endured in silence. He never asked me to stop. He never complained about the pain. When I finally finished, the sun was starting to rise. Golden light filtered through the high window of the treatment room, painting everything in soft colors. You should stay here until tonight, I said. Then I can help you leave when there's a shift change. No. I'm leaving now. You just had emergency field surgery. You need rest. I've had worse. He stood up slowly. I could see the pain in his face, but his movements were controlled and deliberate. He pulled his jacket closed to hide the bandages. You'll tear the stitches, I protested. They'll hold. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back at me. In the morning light, I could see his face more clearly. Strong features. Dark hair with gray at the temples. Maybe 40 years old. Definitely dangerous. You saved my life, he said quietly. That's a debt I don't forget. I don't want anything from you. I know. That's why it matters. He opened the door and looked both ways down the hallway. Then he was gone, moving quickly despite his injury, disappearing into the morning chaos of a hospital shift change. I stood alone in the treatment room, surrounded by bloody gauze and empty supply packages, and I wondered what I had just done. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I disposed of the medical waste carefully, following proper protocols to ensure nothing looked suspicious. I cleaned the treatment room until no trace of blood remained. I updated my patient charts and handed off care to the morning shift nurse. Dr. Hayes stopped me as I was leaving. Caroline, you look exhausted, he said. Long night. Just the usual, I replied, forcing a smile. That lockdown was insane. I've never seen anything like it. Me neither. Did they find him? The suspect? I don't think so. I heard them say they were expanding the search. Dr. Hayes shook his head. Crazy world we live in. Get some rest. I'll see you tonight. I drove home in a daze. My apartment was in a run-down building on the edge of the city. The neighborhood wasn't great, but the rent was cheap, and it was close to the hospital. I had lived there for 4 years, ever since I graduated nursing school. My cat, Pepper, greeted me at the door with loud complaints about her empty food bowl. I fed her, showered, and collapsed into bed. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man in the treatment room, about his eyes, about the way he had endured pain without a sound, about his final words before he left. That's a debt I don't forget. What did that mean? Who was he? Why were the police so desperate to find him? And more importantly, what would happen to me now? I finally fell asleep around noon, and I dreamed of red lights and dark eyes and blood that wouldn't wash away. I woke up at 5 in the evening to the sound of engines. First I thought I was still dreaming. The sound was too big, too loud, too close. But as I blinked awake, I realized the noise was real and it was coming from outside my window. I stumbled out of bed and pulled back the curtain. My entire street was filled with black SUVs. Not 1 or 2. Not 5 or 10. Hundreds of them. They lined both sides of the road as far as I could see. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, their posture military straight, their expressions unreadable. My heart stopped. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. I watched in frozen horror as more SUVs arrived, parking in perfect formation. They blocked every intersection. They covered every exit from my building. My neighbors were coming outside, staring with open mouths at the display of force. Then I saw him, the man from the hospital. He stepped out of the center SUV, moving carefully but confidently. He wore a different suit now, perfectly tailored and expensive. The bandages were hidden beneath his clothes. If I hadn't treated him myself, I never would have known he was injured. 2 men flanked him. They were both large and dangerous looking, and they scanned the area constantly as if expecting threats from every direction. He looked up at my building. His eyes found my window as if he knew exactly where I was. Even from 2 stories up, I could feel the weight of his gaze. Someone knocked on my door. I jumped, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in suits standing in my hallway. They looked polite but immovable. I opened the door a crack. "Can I help you, Miss Caroline Foster?" one of them asked. "Yes. Mr. Dmitry Volkov requests your presence. Please come with us." Dmitry Volkov. The name hit me like ice water. I knew that name. Everyone in this city knew that name. He was a ghost story, a legend, the kind of man people whispered about but never spoke of directly. He controlled half the city's underground operations. He owned politicians and judges. He made people disappear. He was untouchable by law because he existed above it. And I had stitched him up in a hospital treatment room. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "What does he want?" "That's between you and Mr. Volkov. Please, Miss Foster. It's not a request." I looked past them down the hallway. More men were stationed at the stairwell, at the elevator, at every exit. I was surrounded. There was nowhere to run. I grabbed my jacket and followed them downstairs. The street was even more surreal up close. My neighbors watched from their windows and doorways. Some held phones recording everything. Others just stared in shock. The men led me to the center SUV where Dmitry Volkov waited. He studied me as I approached. In the fading evening light, he looked less like a dying patient and more like what he truly was. A man of absolute power. "Miss Foster," he said. His voice was calm and controlled. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" "No." At least he was honest. "You saved my life last night," he continued. "That's not something I take lightly. I was just doing my job." "No. You risked everything to protect a stranger. You lied to the police. You violated protocol. You could lose your career, your freedom, everything you've worked for. And you did it anyway." He stepped closer to me. "Why?" I didn't have an answer. Or rather, I had too many answers and none of them made sense. "Because it was the right thing to do," I said finally. He smiled. It was a cold smile, but there was something genuine in it. "That's what I thought. That's why you're here." "I don't understand." "Your name was flagged in police reports this morning. They're reviewing security footage from the hospital. They're questioning staff. It's only a matter of time before they connect you to my disappearance." My blood ran cold. "What?" "You're in danger, Miss Foster. Significant danger. The police want to arrest you for aiding a fugitive. My enemies want to use you to get to me. Your life as you knew it ended the moment you made your choice in that treatment room." I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. "So what happens now?" "Now you come with me. Under my protection. And if I refuse?" He looked at me with those dark, measuring eyes. "Then you go to prison or you end up dead in an alley. Those are your only other options." I looked around at the hundreds of armed men, at my neighbors watching, at my small apartment window 2 stories up. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, all of it was gone. Because I had chosen to save a life. "I need to get Pepper," I said quietly. "My cat." Dmitry Volkov nodded to one of his men. "Bring the cat. And anything else Miss Foster needs from her apartment." He opened the door of the SUV and gestured for me to enter. I took one last look at my street, at the life I was leaving behind. Then I climbed into the vehicle. The door closed behind me with a final, heavy sound. The SUV moved through the city in a convoy. I sat in silence, watching familiar streets pass by through tinted windows. Dmitry sat across from me, his expression unreadable. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now." I wanted to argue, but I was exhausted. My mind was still trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Less than a day ago, I was a normal nurse working a normal shift. Now I was in a convoy of SUVs with a crime boss who apparently owned my life. "The cat," I said suddenly. "Did they get Pepper?" Dimitri pressed a button on the console. "Status on the animal." A voice crackled through the speaker. "Secured. Following in Vehicle 7 with Miss Foster's personal items." I felt a small relief. At least Pepper was safe. We drove for another 20 minutes before turning onto a private road. The convoy moved through a gate that opened automatically, then up a long driveway lined with trees. The end was a house. No, not a house. An estate. It was massive and modern, all glass and steel and perfect lines. Security cameras were visible at every corner. The grounds were immaculate. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. The SUV stopped at the entrance. Dimitri stepped out first, moving carefully to avoid straining his injury. Then he held out his hand to help me down. I ignored it and climbed out myself. He smiled slightly at that. "Independent. I like that." "I'm not here because I want to be," I said coldly. "I know. But you're alive because you're here. That should count for something." He led me inside. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, expensive furniture, art that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Everything was clean and modern and completely intimidating. A woman in professional clothes approached us. She was maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that assessed me quickly. "This is Natasha," Dimitri said. "She manages the household. Anything you need, ask her." "Miss Foster," Natasha said with a slight accent. "Your room is prepared. Please follow me." I looked at Dimitri. "Just like that. You're not going to explain anything. Tomorrow. Tonight you rest. I don't take orders from you. Consider them suggestions then. But you look like you're about to collapse, and I'd rather not have to carry you to your room. It would strain my stitches." He was right. I was exhausted. My body was running on adrenaline and fear, and both were fading fast. I followed Natasha up a curved staircase to the second floor. She led me to a room at the end of the hallway. When she opened the door, I stopped. It was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds. A king-size bed with soft white linens. A private bathroom with marble counters. A sitting area with a couch and television. "Your belongings will be brought up shortly," Natasha said. "The kitchen is available 24 hours. Medical supplies are in the bathroom if you need to check Mr. Volkov's wound." "I'm not his personal nurse." "Of course not. But you're a medical professional and you care about your patients. Even the difficult ones." She left before I could respond. I walked to the window and looked out at the grounds. The sun was setting, painting everything in orange and gold. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely wrong. I was a prisoner in a palace, and I didn't know how to escape. Pepper arrived 20 minutes later, carried by the same man who had escorted me downstairs from my apartment. My cat meowed loudly in protest, clearly unhappy about being transported in her carrier. "She's very vocal," the man said, handing me the carrier. "She doesn't like change," I replied, taking her. He also brought a bag with some of my clothes and personal items. I thanked him, and he left without another word. I released Pepper from her carrier. She immediately began exploring the room, sniffing everything suspiciously. I sat on the bed and watched her investigate under the furniture and behind the curtains. "What have I gotten us into?" I whispered. Pepper, of course, had no answer. I unpacked my few belongings. It was strange seeing my cheap clothes in this expensive room. Everything I owned looked shabby and worn in comparison to the luxury surrounding me. There was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Natasha holding a tray. "Dinner," she said. You didn't eat with Mr. Volkov, so I brought something to your room. I'm not hungry. You need to eat. You're exhausted, and your body needs fuel. She set the tray on the small table by the window. It was simple food, soup, bread, fruit, but it smelled good. Thank you, I said quietly. You're welcome, Miss Foster. Please, just Caroline. Natasha nodded. Very well. Caroline, if you need anything during the night, press the button by the bed. Someone will respond immediately. After she left, I ate the soup. She was right, I was starving. I hadn't eaten since before my shift at the hospital, and my body was demanding fuel. When I finished, I took a shower. The bathroom was enormous, with a walk-in shower that had 6 different shower heads. The water pressure was perfect, and the temperature was exactly what I needed. I stood under the hot water and let myself cry. Everything had fallen apart so fast. My job, my home, my life. All of it was gone because I had made one choice in one moment. I had saved a man's life, and now my own life was no longer my own. After the shower, I put on clean clothes and checked on Pepper. She had claimed the armchair by the window and was sitting there grooming herself, seemingly content now that she had established her territory. I climbed into bed. The sheets were soft and smelled like lavender. Despite everything, despite my fear and anger and confusion, I fell asleep almost immediately. I woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the expensive furniture and the view of the grounds, and everything came rushing back. I found a coffee pot on the sitting area table that hadn't been there the night before. Beside it was a note in neat handwriting. Mr. Volkov requests your presence for breakfast at 9. Natasha. Check my phone. It was 8:30. I dressed in jeans and a simple shirt, then made my way downstairs. The house was quiet. I passed several men in suits who nodded at me politely but didn't speak. Security, I assumed. Always watching. I found the dining room following the sound of voices. Dmitri sat at the head of a long table, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. When I entered, he looked up. Good morning, Miss Foster. I hope you slept well. As well as anyone can in a strange place. Please sit. I took a seat several chairs away from him. A woman I hadn't seen before brought out plates of food. Eggs, toast, fruit, bacon. I ate in silence, aware that Dmitri was watching me. We need to discuss your situation, he said finally. You mean my imprisonment? Your protection? It's the same thing from where I'm sitting. He set down his coffee cup. You saved my life. That makes you valuable to my enemies. They'll try to capture you to use as leverage against me. The police want to arrest you for aiding a criminal. Your old life is over, Miss Foster. The question now is what your new life looks like. So I'm just supposed to stay here forever? Hidden away like a secret? For now, yes. Until things settle. And how long will that take? Weeks. Maybe months. I pushed my plate away. This is insane. I did nothing wrong. Saved a life. That's what nurses do. You saved the wrong life in the eyes of many people. There's no such thing as a wrong life to save. He studied me with those dark eyes. You really believe that, don't you? Yes. Even knowing who I am. What should I do? I don't judge my patients. I treat them. I'm not your patient anymore. No. Now you're my captor. The word hung in the air between us. Dmitri didn't flinch. He simply nodded. If that's how you see it, I can't change your mind. But understand this, I'm keeping you alive. Whether you appreciate that or not. He stood up, moving carefully. I noticed he favored his left side slightly. The wound was still healing. The grounds are secure. You can move freely within the estate. There's a gym, a pool, a library. Natasha will show you around. But you cannot leave. Not yet. And if I try, then my men will stop you. Gently, but they'll stop you. He left the dining room, leaving me alone with my anger and my breakfast. The days blended together. I explored the estate, mapping every room and hallway in my mind. I swam in the pool. I read books from the library. I took care of Pepper and tried not to think about everything I had lost. Dimitri kept his distance. I saw him occasionally, always moving through the house with purpose, always surrounded by his men. When we passed each other, he nodded politely, but we didn't speak. I learned the routines of the household. Natasha ran everything with quiet efficiency. The security team rotated in 8-hour shifts. Meals were served at specific times. The grounds were patrolled constantly. It was a prison, but a comfortable one. On the 5th day, Natasha found me in the library. "Caroline, Mr. Volkov would like you to check his wound. He thinks it might be infected." I followed her to Dimitri's office. He was sitting at his desk, and when we entered, he stood up. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "Let me see it." He unbuttoned his shirt. The bandage was clean, but I could see swelling around the edges. I put on gloves and carefully removed the dressing. The wound was red and inflamed. Not seriously infected yet, but heading that direction. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," I said. "This needs rest." "I don't have time for rest." "Make time. Or the infection will make the time for you." I cleaned the wound and applied fresh bandages. He endured it without complaint, just like in the hospital. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "It's my job." "Was your job? What will you do now?" "I don't know. You've taken away all my options. I've kept you alive. You've trapped me." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Would you rather I had let you face the police alone? Let my enemies find you?" I didn't answer. 'Cause he was right and I hated it. "There," I said, finishing the new bandage. "Keep it clean. Don't strain yourself. Come see me in 3 days so I can check it again. You're acting like my nurse." Old habits. I left his office before he could say anything else. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, looking out at the grounds. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light. I could see security guards making their rounds, moving like ghosts through the garden. I was trapped, and I couldn't see a way out. A knock on my door made me turn. When I opened it, Natasha stood there. "There's someone you should meet," she said. I followed her downstairs to a room I hadn't been in before. It was a sitting room, smaller and warmer than the others. And sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm night, was a child. A girl maybe 8 years old. She had dark hair and huge brown eyes that looked too old for her face. When she saw me, she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "This is Elena," Natasha said softly. "Mr. Volkov's niece." I knelt down so I was at eye level with the little girl. She watched me warily, like a wild animal deciding whether to run or fight. "Hi, Elena," I said gently. "I'm Caroline." She didn't respond. She just stared at me with those two old eyes. "Elena doesn't speak much," Natasha explained. "She's been through a lot." "What happened?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Her parents were killed 6 months ago. A rival family. She was in the car when it happened. She saw everything." My heart broke. This child had witnessed her parents' murder. No wonder her eyes looked ancient. "Can I sit with you?" asked Elena. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. I sat on the couch, keeping some distance between us. Elena watched me like a hawk watching prey. "I work with a lot of kids at the hospital," I said quietly. "Sometimes they're scared. Sometimes they're hurt. Sometimes they just don't want to talk. That's okay. You don't have to talk if you don't want to." Elena's grip on her blanket loosened slightly. "I have a cat," I continued. "Her name is Pepper. She's very soft and very lazy. She mostly just sleeps all day. Would you like to meet her?" For the first time, Elena showed interest. She nodded. "Okay. She's in my room. We can visit her tomorrow if you want." "Can I see her now?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper, but it was the first time she had spoken. I looked at Natasha, who nodded. "Sure. Let's go meet Pepper." We went upstairs to my room. Pepper was asleep on the bed, curled into a ball. When we entered, she lifted her head and meowed in greeting. Elena approached slowly. She reached out a tentative hand and gently touched Pepper's fur. The cat, sensing a child's need, didn't move away. She just purred. "She's so soft," Elena whispered. "Would you like to pet her?" Elena sat on the bed and carefully stroked Pepper's back. The cat stretched and rolled over, demanding more attention. For the first time since I'd arrived at this estate, I saw something close to a smile on someone's face. "Can I come visit Pepper again?" Elena asked. "Any time you want." Elena became my constant companion. She would appear at my door in the morning, quietly asking if she could see Pepper. She would sit on my floor and play with the cat while I read or worked on puzzles from the library. She still didn't talk much, but her presence was comfortable. I understood silence. I understood trauma. I knew better than to push her to open up before she was ready. One afternoon we were in the garden. Elena was watching butterflies while Pepper stalked them unsuccessfully. I was reading a book, enjoying the sunshine. "You're different from the others," Elena said suddenly. I looked up. "Different how?" "You're not scared of Uncle Dimitri." "Should I be? Everyone else is." Thought about that. It was true. The staff moved around Dimitri with nervous efficiency. His men treated him with absolute respect bordering on fear. "I'm angry at him," I said honestly. "I'm frustrated. But I'm not scared." "Why not?" "Because he needs me alive. And because I've seen him at his worst. When someone is bleeding and broken, they can't hide who they really are." "What did you see?" "Someone who's very tired. Someone who's been hurt a lot. Someone who keeps going because he has to." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's what Mommy used to say about him. That he was tired." "Did you know him well? Before?" "He came to visit sometimes. He always brought me presents. But Mommy said he was sad inside, that he had to be strong for too many people and it made him lonely." It was the most Elena had ever said at once. I was careful not to react too strongly, not to scare her back into silence. "Your mom sounds like she was very wise," I said quietly. "She was. I miss her." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." Elena came and sat beside me on the bench. She leaned against my shoulder, something she had never done before. I put my arm around her gently. "Uncle Dimitri is sad too," she whispered. "He tries to hide it, but I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because I'm sad the same way. We both try to pretend we're okay." I held her a little tighter. This poor child had lost everything and was trying so hard to be brave. We sat like that for a long time, watching Pepper chase butterflies she would never catch. I had just finished changing Dimitri's bandage when Elena burst into the office without knocking. Her face was pale, and she was breathing hard like she had been running. "Uncle Dimitri," she gasped. "There are men outside. Different men. They have guns." Dimitri was on his feet immediately. The pain from his wound didn't slow him down. He pressed a button on his desk, and alarms began blaring throughout the house. "Natasha, get Elena to the safe room," he ordered into an intercom. "Caroline, you go with them." "What's happening?" I demanded. "Rivals. They've found us." Through the window, I could see figures moving through the garden. They wore dark clothes and moved with military precision. There had to be at least 20 of them. Natasha appeared in the doorway. "Come. Now." She grabbed Elena's hand and reached for mine. Pulled away. "I need to stay," I said. "If anyone gets hurt, they'll need medical help." "Caroline, this isn't a hospital," Dimitri said sharply. "These men are here to kill. You need to hide." "I'm not hiding while people get shot. You're not trained for this. Neither is Elena. Get her to safety. I'll stay here and do what I do best." Dimitri stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded to Natasha. "Take Elena. Caroline stays." Natasha looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew better. She pulled Elena toward the door. The little girl looked back at me with frightened eyes. "It's okay," I told her. I'll be fine. Take care of Pepper for me. Then they were gone, and it was just Dimitri and me and the sound of gunfire starting outside. The battle lasted 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. I stayed in Dimitri's office, preparing medical supplies while he coordinated his security team through radio communications. His voice was calm and controlled, giving orders like he was organizing a business meeting instead of a gunfight. When the shooting finally stopped, 4 of his men were injured. 2 had minor wounds. 2 were serious. I worked on the serious cases first. 1 man had been shot in the shoulder. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good. I cleaned and bandaged the wound while he gritted his teeth and didn't complain. The second man was worse. Gunshot. He was losing blood fast, and his skin was turning gray. He needs surgery, I told Dimitri. Real surgery in a real hospital. I can't do enough here. Hospital means police reports. Police reports mean questions. Questions mean he lives. No hospital means he dies. Dimitri looked at the injured man. He was young, maybe 25. His eyes were closed and his breathing was shallow. Call the private surgeon, Dimitri said into his radio. Tell him it's urgent. While we waited for the surgeon, I did what I could. I started in 4 for fluids. I applied pressure to slow the bleeding. I talked to the young man, keeping him conscious, keeping him fighting. What's your name? I asked. Alex, he whispered. Okay, Alex. You're going to be fine. Help is coming. Just stay with me. Hurts. I know. But you're tough. You're going to get through this. His hand found mine and gripped it weakly. Thank you. The surgeon arrived 20 minutes later. He was an older man with steady hands and no questions. He took one look at Alex and nodded. I'll need an operating room. We have one, Dimitri said. Natasha will show you. They carried Alex away on a stretcher. I watched him go, praying he would survive. After everyone was treated and the bodies of the attackers were removed from the grounds, Dimitri found me in the library. I was washing blood off my hands in the bathroom sink, scrubbing harder than necessary. You should have gone to the safe room, he said. 4 men would have died if I had. You could have died. But I didn't. He stepped closer. There was something different in his eyes. Not anger. Something softer. You didn't have to stay, he said quietly. You could have hidden with Elena. No one would have blamed you. That's not who I am. I know. That's the problem. What problem? You make it very difficult to keep you at a distance. I turned to face him fully. We were standing close now, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried every day. Maybe you shouldn't keep me at a distance, I said. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm not afraid of you, Dimitri. I'm not afraid of your world. I'm only afraid of wasting my life pretending I don't care about things that matter. He reached out and touched my face. His hand was gentle despite all the violence it had commanded. If I let you in, he said slowly, if I let you matter to me, you become a target. A permanent one. I'm already a target. I became one the moment I chose to save your life. This is different. How? Because now I care if something happens to you. The words hung in the air between us. He dropped his hand and stepped back, breaking the moment. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we deal with the consequences of tonight. He left before I could respond. I stood alone in the library, my hands finally clean but still trembling. The consequences came faster than expected. The next morning Natasha woke me early. You need to see something, she said. I followed her to Dimitri's office. He was standing at his desk, looking at security footage on multiple screens. When I entered, he gestured for me to watch. The video showed last night's attack from different angles. I watched men storm the grounds. I watched the firefight. I watched bodies fall. What am I looking for? Yes. This. He zoomed in on one of the attackers. The man was wearing a uniform. A police uniform. Corrupt cops, Dmitri explained. Working for my rivals. They fed them information about our security, about our routines. That's how they knew exactly when to strike. How many? At least 5 that we can identify. Maybe more. Felt sick. Police officers, the people who were supposed to protect citizens, working with criminals to commit murder. What are you going to do? Asked. What I always do. Remove the threat. By threatening them, how? By exposing them. I'll send evidence to federal investigators who aren't corrupt. They'll handle it. You're not going to hurt them. He looked at me with those dark eyes. Is that what you think of me? That I hurt everyone who crosses me? I don't know what to think anymore. I'm not a good man, Caroline. I've done terrible things. But I have rules. I don't hurt people, even corrupt ones. I don't hurt children. I don't traffic people or drugs. And I don't break promises. What promises? The one I made to myself when I took over this organization. That I would be better than the monsters who came before me. He turned off the screens. The men who attacked us last night. They were here to hurt Elena. They wanted to hurt her so they could break me. That's the kind of enemy I face. So yes, I fight back. And yes, people face consequences. But I choose my targets carefully. I didn't know what to say to that. The world wasn't black and white the way I had always believed. It was complicated and messy and full of people making impossible choices. Elena found me in the garden that afternoon. She was quieter than usual, and she stayed close to my side. Are the bad men gone? She asked. Yes, sweetheart. They're gone. Will more come? I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her she was safe now. But I respected her too much for that. Maybe, I said honestly. But your uncle has a lot of people protecting you. And I'm here too. You were brave last night. Uncle Dmitri told me you stayed to help people even though you were scared. I was very scared. But you did it anyway. That's what bravery means. Being scared but doing it anyway. She thought about that for a moment. Then she said, my mommy was brave too. She tried to protect me and Daddy when the bad men came. But she couldn't stop them. My heart broke for this child who had seen too much. Your mommy loved you very much, I said gently. She did everything she could. I know. I just wish it was enough. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We sat together in the garden, watching clouds drift across the sky. Pepper came and curled up between us, purring contentedly. For a little while we could pretend the world was peaceful. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Dmitri had said. About having rules. About trying to be better than the monsters before him. I found him in his office, working late as usual. He looked up when I entered. Can't sleep, he asked. Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it? I sat in the chair across from his desk. Tell me about your rules. About how you decide who deserves mercy and who doesn't. He leaned back in his chair. That's a complicated question. I have time. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak. When I was 25, my father was eliminated by a rival family. They shot him in the street like a dog. I inherited his organization, his enemies, and his debts. I also inherited his reputation for cruelty. What was his reputation? That he was a monster. That he hurt people for fun. That he didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. Dmitri stood and walked to the window. I promised myself I would be different. I would use violence only when necessary. I would protect innocent people, not harm them. I would build something that lasted, not something that would be destroyed. And have you kept that promise? Mostly. There are things I regret, choices I wish I could undo. But I've tried to minimize the damage. To be strategic instead of emotional. What about the people you've hurt? He turned to face me. I've hurt 17 people personally. Each one was either trying to eliminate me or had hurt someone under my protection. I don't enjoy it. I don't do it lightly. But I do it when necessary. The honesty was startling. Most people would have lied or deflected. But Dmitri answered directly without shame or pride. "Does that make me a monster in your eyes?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm still trying to figure out what I believe." "That's fair." We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked, "What happened to your father's eliminators?" "I found them. Every single one. And I made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else." "Did you eliminate them?" "No. I sent them to prison. I gathered evidence, built cases, and turned them over to federal prosecutors. They're all serving life sentences." "Why not eliminate them?" "Because I wanted them to live with what they did. Death is too easy. Prison is harder." Understood then. Dimitri's rules weren't about being good or evil. They were about control. About choosing his actions carefully instead of acting on emotion. "You're not what I expected," I said quietly. "What did you expect? A monster. And now I see someone trying very hard not to become one." The next week passed quietly. No more attacks. No more emergencies. Just routine days in a guarded estate. I spent most of my time with Elena. We read books together. We played games. We sat in the garden and talked about her parents, helping her process her grief a little at a time. I also spent time with Dmitri. Not romantic time, just quiet companionship. He would work in his office while I read nearby. We would eat dinner together and talk about safe topics like books and movies. The household staff began treating me differently. Not as a prisoner or a guest, but as part of the family. They asked my opinion on menus. They included me in household decisions. Natasha even asked me to help interview a new tutor for Elena. I was becoming part of this world, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. On Saturday morning, Dmitri asked me to take a walk with him. We strolled through the gardens with 2 security guards following at a discreet distance. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "My situation. The fact that you can't leave. That you're trapped here because of choices I forced on you. You didn't force me to save your life. No. But I forced you into this life afterward." We stopped by a fountain. The water made a peaceful sound as it splashed. "I want to give you options," Dmitri said. "Real options, not forced choices." "What kind of options?" "First option, you can leave. I'll give you a new identity, a new city, enough money to start over. You'll be protected from a distance, but you'll be free." My heart started racing. "You'd really let me go?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because keeping you here against your will makes me no better than the people I fight against." "What's the second option?" He looked at me directly. "You stay. Not as a prisoner but as part of my household. You'd have a role here, real work, real purpose. Elena needs you. The staff needs someone with your skills. And," he paused. "And," prompted. "And I need you." The words were simple but heavy with meaning. "What would my role be?" Ask carefully. "Whatever you want it to be. Medical consultant. Elena's guardian. Household manager. Or just Caroline Foster, the woman who reminds me that not everyone operates on power and fear. I need time to think about it. Take all the time you need. But know that either choice is yours. No pressure. No threats. Just a genuine offer." We walked back to the house in silence. My mind was spinning with possibilities and fears and hopes I didn't want to name. I spent 3 days thinking about Dimitri's offer. I walked the grounds. I talked to Elena. I even called my old supervisor at the hospital from a secure phone to see if there was any chance of going back to my old life. There wasn't. The police investigation into the night I hid Dmitri was still active. My name was flagged. If I returned to normal life, I would be arrested within hours. So it really came down to 2 choices: disappear with a new identity, or stay in this strange new world I had accidentally joined. On the 4th day, I found Dmitri in his office. "I've made my decision," I said. He looked up from his papers, his expression carefully neutral. "And I'm staying." Something shifted in his eyes. Relief maybe. Or hope. Are you sure? He asked. Yes. But I have conditions. Of course you do. I sat down across from him. First, I want to continue Elena's medical education. She needs therapy, real therapy, not just time and hope. Agreed. I'll bring in the best child psychologist money can buy. Second, I want to establish a proper medical facility here on the estate. Not just a first aid kit but real equipment. If another attack happens, I want to be prepared. That's reasonable. I'll have Natasha work with you on the specifications. Third, I want permission to leave the estate sometimes. Not often, but I need to not feel trapped. He hesitated on that one. It would have to be heavily guarded. I understand. But I need fresh air and normal places occasionally. Even prisoners get yard time. You're not a prisoner. Then prove it. He nodded slowly. Agreed. Anything else? One more thing. If I'm staying, then I'm part of this household. Not a guest, not an employee. That means you treat me with respect. You listen to my opinions. And you stop trying to protect me from every difficult truth. Fair enough. We shook hands across the desk. His grip was firm and warm. Welcome home, Caroline, he said quietly. My new role in the household began immediately. Dmitri had contractors convert a section of the estate's lower level into a proper medical facility. It had examination rooms, surgical equipment, and enough supplies to handle emergencies. I also began working with Elena's new therapist, a kind woman named Sophia who specialized in childhood trauma. Together, we created a treatment plan that would help Elena process her parents' deaths in a healthy way. The little girl was making progress. She smiled more. She talked more. She even laughed sometimes when Pepper did something silly. I also took on informal duties as household manager. Natasha was getting older and appreciated having someone to share the burden. I coordinated staff schedules, managed supplies, and handled the 1,000 small details that kept a large estate running smoothly. Dmitri and I fell into a comfortable routine. We had breakfast together every morning. We discussed household business and security concerns. We debated books and politics and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. We didn't talk about the growing closeness between us. We didn't acknowledge the way he looked at me sometimes, or the way my heart sped up when he entered a room. We kept it professional and safe. But the tension was building. The breakthrough came 3 months after I decided to stay. Dmitri had been away for 2 days handling business in another city. When he returned, he looked exhausted and troubled. I found him in his office late that night, staring at nothing. What happened? He asked. There was a situation. A conflict between 2 of my operations. I had to make a choice about who to support. What kind of choice? He looked at me with hollow eyes. The kind where someone gets hurt no matter what I decide. I sat down beside him. Do you want to talk about it? One of my lieutenants was stealing. Not from me, from civilians. Running protection rackets that crossed the line from business into extortion. Threatening families, hurting innocent people. What did you do? I removed him from power. Turned over evidence of his crimes to the police. He'll spend the next 20 years in prison. That sounds like the right choice. His family won't think so. His children just lost their father because of me. Understood then. Dmitri wasn't troubled by the decision itself. He was troubled by the consequences, by the ripples of harm that spread from every choice he made. You can't control everything, I said gently. You made the best choice you could with the information you had. That's all anyone can do. It never feels like enough. Because you care. If you didn't care, this would be easy. He looked at me. When did you become so wise? I've been learning from someone who tries very hard to do the right thing in impossible circumstances. He took my hand. It was the first intentionally intimate gesture he had made since that moment weeks ago. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For seeing me. Not the monster everyone else sees, but the person underneath. I see both, I said honestly. The monster and the person. And I care about both. We sat like that for a long time, hands linked, saying nothing and everything. The attack came without warning 2 weeks later. This time they didn't try to breach the grounds. They sent a car bomb. It detonated near the front gate, destroying 3 security vehicles and injuring 5 guards. If we had been following normal schedules, Elena and I would have been in one of those vehicles on our way to her therapy appointment. But Dmitri had changed the schedule at the last minute. Some instinct had made him move the appointment to a different time. That instinct saved our lives. I spent 6 hours in the medical facility treating injuries. Burns, shrapnel wounds, broken bones. All 5 guards survived, but 2 would need months of recovery. When I finally finished and went upstairs, I found Dmitri in Elena's room. He was sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her sleep. "They were targeting her," he said without looking at me. "The timing was specific. They knew her therapy schedule." "How?" "Someone on the inside. Someone I trusted." I sat beside him. "You'll find them." I already did. It was the new tutor. The one we hired last month. She was feeding information to my enemies. Where is she now? Gone. On a plane to a country with no extradition treaty. I gave her 24 hours to disappear before I turned evidence of her crimes over to federal investigators. You let her go. She has a daughter. 6 years old. I showed her pictures of what happens to children when their parents go to prison. She took the deal. I looked at this man who was supposed to be a monster, who had chosen mercy even for someone who had betrayed him. "You're a good man," I said. "No. I'm just tired of creating orphans." Elena stirred in her sleep. Dmitri reached out and gently adjusted her blanket. The gesture was so tender it made my throat tight. "I can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "Every time I try to build something good, someone tries to destroy it. Every time I show mercy, it gets used against me. So what will you do? End it. Once and for all. My enemies think I'm weak because I have rules. They think mercy is a weakness they can exploit. It's time to show them they're wrong." "How?" He looked at me. "By doing what I should have done years ago. By taking control completely. No rivals. No competition. Just one organization operating under one set of rules." That sounds like a war. It is a war. But it's a war I'm going to win. Because the alternative is watching everyone I care about get hurt while I try to be reasonable. Understood. He had tried to be better than the monsters before him. He had tried to minimize harm. But the world kept punishing him for it. "What do you need from me?" "Yes. Stay safe. Keep Elena safe. And remind me why I'm doing this when it gets hard." "I can do that." He took my hand again. "Promise me something." "What?" "If this goes wrong, if something happens to me, you'll take Elena and disappear. Use the resources I've set aside. Don't try to fight. Just run. Nothing is going to happen to you. Promise me anyway." I looked into his eyes and saw fear. Real fear. The kind that comes from knowing how fragile life really is. "I promise," I said. The war Dmitri predicted lasted 3 weeks. I didn't see most of it. I stayed in the estate with Elena, keeping her distracted and safe while Dmitri's organization systematically eliminated every rival operation in the city. He didn't kill anyone personally. He didn't have to. He used evidence, bribery, and strategic pressure to dismantle competing organizations from within. Arrests were made. Leaders disappeared. Assets were seized. By the end of 3 weeks, there were no more rivals. Just one organization operating under Dmitri's rules. The cost was high. 7 of his people died. 12 more were seriously injured. But when it was over, the city was quieter than it had been in years. The violence that had plagued neighborhoods for decades simply stopped. Dmitri came home on a Tuesday evening. He looked older, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. But when Elena ran to him and hugged his legs, he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. "Uncle Dmitri, you're home," she shouted. "I'm home, little one. And I'm not leaving again for a long time." That night, after Elena was asleep, Dimitri found me in the library. I was reading by the fire, Pepper curled up beside me. "It's done," he said simply. "I know." He sat beside me. We didn't speak for a long time. We just existed together in the quiet. Finally he said, "I want to show you something." He led me to his office and opened a safe. Inside were documents, legal papers, property deeds. "This is for Elena," he explained. "Trusts, investments, properties. If something happens to me, she'll be taken care of. Nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does..." He pulled out another set of papers. "These are for you. Your own accounts, your own resources. You're not dependent on me anymore. If you want to leave, you can. If you want to stay, that's your choice too." I looked at the papers without touching them. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you deserve to know you have options. Real options. Not forced choices. I already made my choice. You made it when you were trapped. Now you're free. So make it again." I looked at him. At this man who had accidentally changed my entire life. Who had shown me a world I never knew existed. Who had given me purpose and family and something I was afraid to name. "I'm staying," I said. "Not because I have to. Not because I'm trapped. But because this is where I want to be." "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, I kissed him. It was quick and gentle, barely more than a brush of lips. But it said everything I couldn't put into words. When I pulled back, he was staring at me with wonder. "Caroline Foster," he said softly. "What am I going to do with you?" "Whatever you want. As long as it involves staying here with you and Elena, in this strange life we've built." He kissed me back. Slowly, deeply, with years of restraint finally breaking free. When we finally separated, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "I've loved you since that night in the hospital when you chose to save a stranger instead of following rules. I love you too. Even though you're dangerous and complicated and impossible. Especially because of that. Especially because of that." We stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the fire burned low and the world outside stayed quiet. My old life is gone forever. My future was uncertain. But at that moment I had everything I needed. A strange man had stumbled into my hospital bleeding and desperate. I had made a choice that changed everything. And somehow, impossibly, it had led me here. To love, to family, to a home I never expected in the heart of darkness. 500 black SUVs had surrounded my house at dawn, and I had been terrified. But now I understand. They hadn't come to threaten me. They had come to claim me. To bring me home to a place I didn't know I was searching for. And I was finally truly home.